25 minutes, 15 minutes, about the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's close enough.
I can't remember the last time we podcasted and it wasn't 5 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace, honestly.
Yeah, the voices are like normal voices and not an octave and a half lower, or at least a half octave lower, and the brain should be functioning fairly well.
Yeah, and not dying for coffee.
Yeah, exactly. I guess start with sheep, right? Was that the big hunt you went on this year?
Yeah, I went on 2 sheep hunts this year, actually. So my son turned 10 on July 31st, which is the day before August 1st, which is the sheep opener for youth season, which is August 1st through 5th. So we went in a few days early and spent his 10th birthday out in the mountains. And I've never been out in the mountains that early. And honestly, we had 2 days in a row that was like, it felt like 70 degrees and blue skies, no clouds. It was something that I have never experienced before while backpacking, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, was it super buggy? Sometimes the first shot at things is nice, but it might not be optimal weather.
Yeah, no, it wasn't buggy at all. Actually, there were some flies that would come into our tent and hang out in the rain fly type of deal, but other than that, it was not bad at all. No mosquitoes, no CMs, no nothing.
Nice.
But we saw 7 or 8 sheep, 5 rams. 3 of them were 3/4 curl, 1 was 7/8 curl, and 1 was a banana horn. We got within like 200 to 300 yards from a 3/4 curl for about an hour and a half, which was really cool just to sit there and, find him and look at him and get glass on him and have my son look at him and stuff. And he was 7 years old. And so this 1 7/8 curl that we saw was probably legal by age, but I don't know if I would want my son to shoot that for his first one and potentially have some biologist in the sealing office in town here,
Yeah, make a name for himself. Yeah, by lighting up a little kid.
Yeah, exactly. But so we walked out of there with no sheep, but I mean, it was just absolutely phenomenal time, being out there with my son and having him experience his first backpacking trip and everything. It was really nice. And then a couple weeks ago, me and a friend went back into the same area for 3.5 days and just kind of putzed around, hung out. We saw like 13 sheep in that same area and found a band of 6 rams up into another creek. And we just didn't have enough time to make a play on them, but it was great.
How'd you choose the spot? Was it because you want, obviously, Revan likes to hunt, like he's fine with it. He's been on some moose floats and things like that. So he was going to be pretty amped about it, but you still want that to be a pretty good experience. So did you prioritize adventurous but accessible, or did you prioritize like possibility of sheep, or was it a mix, or how'd you decide?
Well, the area that I took him in, I've been into several times before with people by myself. I was in there by myself last year, and it's like single digit mileage to get to the back of the basin type of deal. And I've always seen sheep in there. I've never seen a legal sheep, but I've seen some that are very, very close. When I say legal, I mean full curl.
Right.
So I've never seen an actual full curl sheep in there, but there are sheep. And so I figured, if it's single digit mileage to get in there, we can very easily we were out there for a week, me and my son. And so, it's like one day go up 2.5 miles, the other day go a few more miles, and just kind of like figure it out and just take it at his pace, give him some words of encouragement to keep going, because we were maybe about 1/4 to a half mile in, and my son was like, "Oh, geez, Dad, my backpack hurts, my hips hurt real bad," and trying to figure out like what a good weight for him was interesting. And then so I ended up having to take stuff out of his pack and put it into mine, so that put me at like 70
yes,
pounds.
There you go, Dad. There you go.
Yeah, and so he was like rocking about 14 pounds going in, and he was even still like, "Do you see where we're gonna camp? Like, can we just camp here?" It's like, "No, son, just a little bit further. It's okay."
Yeah, the first heavy treks that I make, the hips are the first things that kind of get worn. So like even if you ruck, even if you kind of you're in pretty good shape, once you start kind of go up to the mountain and gaining an elevation, it's hard to kind of push through that kind of burning hips. Because it's just weird. You're like burning quads or hamstrings or whatever you're kind of used to, but the hips thing can feel a little bit weird. But yeah, pushing through that, it's tough. Got to be tough for a 10-year-old.
Yeah, and he didn't have. We just had a hand-me-down little pack, those little older Kelty frame pack for him. So it's nothing like super skookum like a Barney's or Stone Glacier
Right.
or EXO or whatever. So I mean, getting him to just work it out, feel it out, and just kind of deal with it is, it's a part of the process. It's like, yeah, your hips are going to hurt if you're on a backpack hunt, kind of no matter what,
Yeah.
just kind of, but having him go through the motions of this is what it is, this is what it takes. Yeah, it's not the most fun just putting one foot in front of the other, but it was it was cool to be out there with him because he would look at things through a different perspective of like, oh my gosh, there's snow and it's July, let's go play in it, let's have a
Nice.
snowball fight. And simple stuff like that, or like crossing literally 24-inch wide creeks. He's like, dude, I did my first creek crossing. It's like,
Nice.
you did, good job.
That's clutch. That's clutch. Yeah, you got to kind of figure out. And again, it's like this could be years until we're doing that stuff with the daughter, where she's going to be able to kind of remember it, and then maybe make a call about whether or not she likes fishing, hiking, hunting, all that sort of stuff. So it's like this isn't a big deal, but it's also a really big deal because, like, it is it's a tiny creek. Yeah, I mean it's nothing, but it's huge, and so you gotta. I would assume, you cheer on Revan, but then also say, hey, there's more, and it's going to get more difficult. So like keep the amp up, but yeah, it's going to be a tough balance.
Yeah, the thing that I have found that's true for my kids is that they just see me doing things that I thoroughly enjoy doing, and
Mhm.
for many many years they could never come.
Yeah,
And so now that he was of age to finally come on something like a backpack trip, which is like what I want to spend my free time on in the fall doing, is backpacking, it inevitably they want to do it. And my daughter was, she was at home like, man, I really want to go. This stinks.
oh,
And
I bet that was torture for her.
yeah, absolutely. And so when I got back home, I took her out for some grouse and everything, and we kind of cruised around town a little bit to make her feel included and everything. And so it was good.
Nice. How's the camping? Any new gear, or how that'll go?
I haven't bought any new gear in a few years. The I bought a new stove last year, which is just a MSR Pocket Rocket 2 with an Ollie Camp titanium stove from Amazon, or sorry, like a little pot to boil water in, and it's like super lightweight, and that setup boils water extremely fast,
Nice.
and that's the thing that I'm honestly the most excited about.
Hmm.
But I have a MSR Hubba Hubba tent. It's a 2-man, and I got an MSR brand gear shed for it, so it like expands the vestibule like big enough
Oh,
that you could put like a full size bicycle in it.
oh,
And
huh.
so that is really nice. Just to you attach it onto the tent before you put the rainfly on, put the rainfly over it, and it like you can put all your junk, like both full adults, all your gear in the one big side, and still have enough room to like maneuver around and have so much extra space.
Gear shed. Interesting. Yeah. Accessory vestibule, $131 on N Wild.
It's worth it.
Huh. Very cool. Yeah, that's the thing when we kind of transition out of the. Well, I guess we start off with the small tent. So going up top there in the 2-man tent, it is super super small, and if you happen to get wet or damp, there's no drying out,
No.
and gosh, it kind of sucks. You get really spoiled by having a hot tent because then you can get the fire going, you can get dried out, you can get warm, you have some space, and you can stand up and put your clothes on. Super nice, super nice. But yeah, that the 2-man tent thing gets a little bit cramped. I bet that vestibule is pretty awesome. The shed is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was really nice because whenever I went back out into that area, like the first week of September with a friend of mine, we tried to. It was raining when we went in, but it wasn't like pouring, but it was very windy and pretty darn rainy. And then whenever we were like, okay, I had everything out of my bag or the tent out of my bag, and I was like, okay, 3, 2, 1, let's pitch the tent. And from the time that it took to get the gear shed on and then put the rain fly over, there was like half an inch of standing water all in the inside of the body of the tent.
Hmm.
And so I didn't hike. I only hiked in with my rain pants on and not my regular pants under it because I didn't want to get too hot. And so I had to take my regular pants out, sponge up all the water, wring it out, and then put those pants on, blow up my stuff, and then get in my sleeping bag because it was towards the evening and just kind of sit in the sleeping bag and try and bake it out, which it worked out, but it's definitely not ideal.
No, that's a man. That stuff sucks. You just it's what you have to do, and it's man. It just I hate it. I hate it. But
Yeah, because
that's what you have. And that's when my buddy Jade and his brother were up in August, and I said, "Hey, we're gonna do the local program here. The local program is a lot of like one maybe 2 night hunts because we can access some of these areas by skiff or by truck or whatever. And a lot of times the weather windows aren't super long, and a lot of the locals here they're doing weekend stuff. We're not taking an entire week off to go blacktail hunting, or taking 2 weeks off or 10 days off to go blacktail hunting. So I'm gonna take you on the normal local thing there. And there are a couple times they're like, yeah, we totally understand why a lot of people just hunt for a couple days, because you can get back in time, but also it's so stinking wet and nearly impossible to get dry once you're soaking wet. But
yeah, and that's
up there, that's like once you've committed, like you're in. You're not. There's no 1 day sheep hunt. There's no 2 day sheep hunt. Like it's like 2 days to get in, and then you're glassing around. Like you've got to set aside that time. So we found the same thing on the moose hunt. So it's super interesting again to be up there and to like know that it's going to take time. There's going to be probably a stretch, a 1 or 2 day stretch where it's going to be raining. You're going to have to get through that, hoping that the next day is going to be dry enough, or you're going to be able to get dry. Whereas sometimes down here it rains for 14 days in a row.
yeah, and the season that we had up here in interior Alaska, it was pretty darn crummy for August and September. Like, yeah, there was a good decent spurt like in the middle of August where it wasn't too bad, but it just seems like it's been overcast and just crummy for forever, right? And then we're gonna very quickly transition into winter. And so whenever we were on that little 3.5 day outing there, and we everything was just absolutely soaked all the way through the first day that we went in, we've kind of were talking amongst ourselves of like, if it continues to rain over the next couple days, like, are we going to have to call it? Like, if all of our stuff is just so saturated, like sleeping bags wet, pads wet, inside a tent, like, I have my tent is fairly old, like 6, 7 years old. So it needs to be like re-waterproofed. And, we were getting like some penetration through the rainfly and through seals and stuff. And it's like, gosh darn it, we're going to have to call this earlier, what? And so luckily it kind of cleared out and then got not rainy, but windy. And
Yeah.
so we just kind of hung everything out in trees or like alders and stuff and just let everything air dry.
Mm-hmm. What elevation did you camp at? I know you watch some YouTube videos and they're kind of down in a valley, like at the river, and they're glassing up. And so it looks like they're going from, 2,400 feet up to 4,400 feet in a day or so, where they're camping up top and they're trying to follow in those rams. Where do you like to camp when you're doing that stuff, or where did you camp with Revan?
So whenever I went with my son, it was all just, it's a slow elevation climb through the valley floor. And of course, each side of the valley that you're hiking into is relatively steep. And so it's like a true alpine situation where it's like you're walking through the trees and everything as you get to like campsites. And the first campsite is like a nice little knoll amongst a bunch of trees and it's kind of barren there. So, there was a flat-ish area to pitch the tent for the first couple days because we got weathered in on our second day in and we couldn't move. So really it's just the way I mostly operate is like generally the only time I'm climbing is like either to get a much higher vantage point to glass for a long time or to pass into another creek to pass up over a ridge to get to another creek to go to where I want to go type of deal. But for the most part, I just stay in the bottoms. And so, the elevation where we were was above Alpine, which I think is like 3,500 feet, about that. but some of the ridges around there were anywhere from 4,500 to almost 6,000 feet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I always wondered about that because if you get higher, then you get a better view. But if you spend all your juice getting up to this ridge and there's nothing up there, and then you got to go back down, it's kind of tough. So you don't really want to commit, but at the same time, you have to get higher. So kind of wondered how that worked out. How did Revan handle the weathered in day?
well, whenever we stopped at a gas station before we hit the final leg before we parked, we got some cards, but I left them in my dang truck.
Perfect, excellent,
So it was a whole lot of just, he brought a book, which he just annihilated in a
good,
couple days,
good,
but I didn't free download any movies or TV shows. I did download or I eventually found that I had a couple podcasts downloaded that were relatively kid friendly.
hmm
So we listened to one of those one night. But other than that, if it was bored or if it was raining and we were in a tent for the entire day, it was just hanging out, reading and talking.
yeah,
It was kind of an interesting time because, you'll find out soon enough that like you don't really get a lot of uninterrupted time where it's like you and your kid rubbing elbows with each other for 24 hours.
yeah, yeah,
It's always like something's going on, or I got to go here. Let's go to the store, or, oh, this person's coming over for dinner, or, oh, we got to go help grandpa, or, whatever. There's not many times that I have found that it's like just you and your kid. So it was honestly an amazing time.
yeah. I was reading Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis, and in there, I think it's that one, either that or Scarcity Brain, in which he cites a study that says after 3 days, like without a screen or in the wilderness, your brain like reaches a different level of like calm, and the anxiety and everything else melts away. And it's you can't have the screens to get there. So I've done it both ways. Where when Abby and I were up on the caribou hunt with Ryan, we had a couple of movies downloaded. So when we were weathered in 6 inches of snow, we watched a couple of movies. And then after that, we didn't watch movies. It was just caribou. And then he got the caribou, we camped, and then we were packing it. And so for the next 3 days, it was just hunting. And man, I slept so well, probably because we were packing out a caribou. But also, like you said, like time in the tent, it was just Ryan. Ryan was in his tent, and then Abby and I were in our tent, but it was just the three of us, and there was nothing else. There was no other distractions or anything. And it was really cool to just get back to the old way of things. And you think that time is going to pass so slowly because you don't have something to entertain you, but you find that there's so much to look at and so much to talk about. And it's crazy to just talk for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours without a screen. And you just, wow, that time went fast. We just hung out and we just chatted. Like, who knows what we chatted about, but we just chatted. It's really nice and refreshing to kind of get back to the way it used to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, for kids, like my son, anytime there was, you know, dry enough outside to walk around, like he always wanted to look at things and like pointing out every mushroom and
Nice.
stopping seemingly every 10 feet, like, ooh, berries, look, ooh, berries, ooh, berries. And so, it was much more natural for him because we're not a giant screen family as much as we can help it. So there wasn't like some kind of crazy dependency to try and be able to get out there because it was something that he was really looking forward to doing all year, like for an entire year.
Mm-hmm.
He was so excited to go. And he was a little underprepared in terms of physical conditioning. We just didn't. I took him rucking around the neighborhood once for a couple miles, and then he decided to get on a razor scooter and knock his two front teeth out, middle of the summer.
Yeah.
And so that put a big damper on everything, and I couldn't push him to be super physical, but he did it either way. He
Yeah.
was just fun with it.
That's awesome. That rite of passage that comes with that first big hunt, like that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, no, it was something that, I took probably 10 times more pictures than I regularly do. And I'm
Mhm.
very glad that I did
Yeah.
because there was just so many little tiny things that he'd be like, Dad, can I see your phone to take a picture? It's like, so I have all these interesting little photos that he took, which are really cool to reflect on and have those.
Yeah. Well, when you were looking at sheep, was there anything that looked like you were about ready to take a move? Did you move to get closer? Did you kind of maybe know that one of them wasn't legal, but you still kind of made a bit of a move anyway to get closer, just so Revan could get some experience with closing distance and staying out of sight?
Yeah, so the really we only had like one actual potential stalk on a sheep that was three-quarter curl. And we were hiking up to the very back of this area where it's kind of shielded on the south facing slope. As you climb up, you're kind of climbing up and around onto the south facing slope onto it. And then you kind of like at the last minute, you got to look over and see if anything's there. And so we just kind of we're going around like a little scree slope and hanging out and, you know, paying attention to where our feet were going rather than what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we got to a terrain to where we could take a break, I was sitting there and I was like talking to him, and we were sitting down. I had some food out for him and everything. We were eating, and I turn around and look over his shoulder. I'm like, oh, geez, you know, holy crap, Revan, there's a sheep right there. And it was one of those bluebird days where it saw us, it knew we were there, but it was so hot that it was just bedded down, not doing a thing.
Mm.
And so we got the glass out, looked at it, and we were probably like 700 yards from it. And so I was like, all right, dude, let's pack up and let's get real close to it. Let's get as close as we possibly can. And yeah, we got to like 250, 300 yards from it. And it just still was just looking at us from his perch and just didn't seem to care. And it was awesome. And what was strange is that last year I was in that same area and I was looking at another three-quarter curl 7-year-old ram. And I was like 900 yards away from it. And I had a really tiny, tiny spotting scope, so I couldn't see worth a darn. And I'm like, well, I need to get close to it. I'm going to bring my rifle. And I don't really have a lot of cover terrain, so I'm going to try and like be a little sneaky and get behind boulders here and there. And it would freak out. It would like stand up, look around, kind of mill about a little bit, but not really leave. And then whenever I decided, I'm like, well, it's probably not legal, so I'm just going to walk directly at it. And then once I did that, it bedded down. Like it could see me, and it just didn't seem to have a care in the world. And I got to like 200 yards from that one and just sat down and just picked him apart with a really low quality spotter, determined he was 7. And it's like, yeah, not worth it, of course. But it was quite strange that they just, in that particular area, just don't seem to really care.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, again, I've never been on a sheep hunt. You hear about people saying certain ranges, they're pretty much all gone or they need to recover. And so with that reputation, some people just bypass what could be a decent area, but they just kind of buy into the fact that there's no sheep there anymore. So it's kind of interesting to, when people are sheep hunters, like what information is out there? Like, do they want that great narrative that there's no sheep in the area so that no one's going to go, there's not going to be pressure? And as long as you keep your mouth shut, like you can have maybe a couple of years of some decent hunting because hunters haven't returned or the reputation of that area hasn't returned.
Yeah, I think that there's maybe a lot of people who don't, there are a ton of people who don't go every year sheep hunting. And so, I think that there's this big mindset that it's like, I got to get farther than everyone. Like everyone is on the road system, everyone is, or everyone has like a jet boat or, whatever to get into these areas. And so I got to like pony up $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 to like fly into northeastern Alaska, like where there's nobody. And they go up there and spend all this money and they don't shoot a sheep and they see, a dozen different groups of hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there are some areas that are, of course, hotspots and hold sheep still and kind of, are still affected by the population crash that's happened. But there's still sheep all over the state.
Yeah.
Right. And it just takes persistence and luck a lot of the times because you could go into an area that holds sheep and there might be sheep there, but there just might not be a legal one.
Yeah.
Or there could be. You just never know.
Yeah, I called a biologist in the area that Ryan and I were going to go for the moose, and I was just asking some general questions, and I wanted to ask, well, questions that were specific enough so that she knew that I wasn't just some person who was like, "Hey, where should I hunt?" I was asking, typically if there's, since we were doing a harvest ticket instead of the tag that I drew, which was kind of unfortunate, but the harvest ticket, 4 brow tines or a 50-inch width. So I was asking, like, if in this area, do there tend to be bulls that are 50 inches wide but only have 2 brow tines? Like, is that a thing where you get the genetics where that tends to happen? She's like, well, it doesn't, some maybe. And I thought, come on. And then she kept talking about how the community hunt had started on the 20th. And well, if you're not in there already, and I thought, man, this okay. I hope you have a much better day, because she's just thrown out there that it seemed like the attitude was it was a waste of her time to talk to me because I wasn't already out there, and there was like no chance I was going to get one because everybody had gone out there for the community hunt on the 20th and there was going to be no bulls left. So yeah, that was kind of like in my brain when we went out, just thinking that everyone's going to be out there. There's going to be no bulls around. They're all dead. Anything that's left isn't going to be worth shooting because we don't have any bull. So it can really mess with your mind if you buy too much into the rhetoric or whatever is out there, and you might read, and so you don't really run your program well. You just have the negative thoughts in the back of your mind.
Yeah, so a couple points here. One of them is in those areas where it's spike fork, 4 brow tine or 50. A lot of those areas don't really seem to have, like, a lot of the genetics that breed 4 brow tine moose are shot the hell up, right? So you find a ton of moose that are 2 or 3 brows, but not 4, right? And so it gets harder and harder kind of every year, because as moose get taken out of the, like, oh, there's a genetic anomaly. He's got 4 or 5 brow tines on one side or the other. And then all of a sudden he gets shot by someone, then that's like one less season for him to breed and potentially breed more 4 brow tine genetics, right?
Hmm.
And so in a lot of those areas, from my experience and other experiences that I've heard from people who do hunt harvest ticket stuff for that, is they'll find moose that are, in that 40-inch range, high 40s, maybe low 50s, very questionable. They're not confident enough to really pull the trigger on everything, and they see tons of 2 or 3 brow tine moose, but not 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other point is, years and years ago, when I was just getting into sheep hunting, I reached out to a fish and game office that was closest to the area that I wanted to target. And I kind of asked, I told him what I wanted to do. And I told him, I wasn't afraid of walking or whatever. And he sent me to an area where you'd have thought that I had like betrayed his family in some kind of tragic way, because the place that he sent me to, it's like, I can't believe anyone would willingly send anyone into this creek. Like, it was, the most hellish death hole of crossing a creek 30 times that's waist deep all the way up to the headwaters, and it's just cold as could be, glacial fed, and it's like, I can't believe anyone would ever come back here. And, me, I was stupid enough to go back there 2 more times,
Were there
over the years.
moose?
Oh, yeah, there were moose, there were bears, there were sheep, there was goats.
Huh.
There was all kinds of critters everywhere. But, the farther you go into those places and you see moose, you're like, this moose is 100% safe for the rest of its life, because I will never, ever, ever consider shooting a moose back here.
Yeah. That was the thing that, it's with any animal. Like, there's some sheep in some areas, or mountain goats, or like all those things up high. We think, okay, I can see it, but how would I, even if it does die on the ledge, how would I get there? And then how would I get down safely? And then if it doesn't die on the ledge and just tumbles, like, will it ever stop? So those are definite considerations with some of that high mountain stuff. And then for the lower stuff, like with moose, we were terrified that it would, if you don't immediately drop it, which can be difficult with moose, obviously, I was afraid that I could put a good shot on this thing, but if it just happens to have enough adrenaline to run 25 yards and end up in the river, then what the heck are we going to do? So yeah, those dynamics are pretty crazy, and it was hard to look at areas that were so like close but like not doable because of wetness. I hadn't been on a hunt like that before. So I'm looking at, we're not very far from camp, so that wouldn't have been that bad, but it's just a swamp. And if you put something down in the swamp, what are we going to do? And it was just weird to look down on areas that would have been, just not doable for us.
Yeah, and I think that there's, a lot of people that, whether, they shoot an animal and it runs off, or they don't know what they're doing and they see an animal and they shoot it and they don't really know the terrain that well, and they find out, they're like, oh god, this is a floating bog, or it's a swamp and I don't have waders, or whatever. Especially for something like a moose, like the next 12 hours of your life are just going to be miserable and lame. And if you don't have any, like a winch or pulleys or rope or anything to get it in an advantageous way to skin it out good, it's just going to suck. All of it's going to suck.
Yeah. So at what point did you call the hunt, and then going back, what was that like? Was he pretty excited to get back, or did he kind of want a little bit more time in the mountains?
Well, I wanted to spend, I think we had set aside 8 full hunting days for me and my son's hunt. And which, I told a lot of people and they were like, that's his first hunt. You're going to be out there for over a week. Like, are you sure that's smart? And I was like, whatever. It's like, I'm bringing food. We're not going to starve. If something really bad happens, I can drop all of my stuff and I could carry him out on my back and be back at the truck in like 2 hours. It'll be fine. But so we hike in on the 29th, camp, and then the entire day, the 28th, the entire day, the 30th, was just a weather day where you couldn't see out your tent for more than a couple hundred yards, and it was just raining all day. So we hung out. Then on the 31st, which was his birthday, and on the 1st were the absolute most bluebird days ever. And on the day of the 1st, a friend of mine and his son hiked in to come meet us back there just to hang out for the night. And so on the night of the 1st, we all hung out. I texted him and I was like, dude, can you bring me an extra pack of wet wipes? My son doesn't know how to ration anything. And can you, for the love of God, please bring me a deck of cards? And so he did both. And he very nicely brought a beer too, and like a soda for my son. And,
Nice.
and it was cool. And so we had a great time there. And then like on the night of the 1st, we spotted a 7/8 sheep at the top of this ridge about 1,100 yards away from us. And like that would have been one to absolutely pursue. But then we didn't spot him till 10 p.m. on the 1st, and then the day of the 2nd, it was another you're stuck in your tent kind of day. And so luckily we had cards that day, and my friend and his son left on the 2nd, and then we woke up on the 3rd, and it was much the same but a little bit better. And then I texted my friend to be like, hey, what does the weather look like for today and the 4th and the 5th? And he said, dude, it's actually getting worse as the days go on. And so we decided to call it on the 3rd, and we hiked out in the rain and everything. And he did great, walking back from the farthest back camp all the way to the truck in one big push. And just, it was interesting because when we got in the truck, my son had a big breakdown and a big cry because he was very sad that it was over. Yeah. And he was just very disappointed that we had to go back to regular life. That he wanted to just spend more time out there. And so it was very emotional for me too, because it was like, this is awesome. This is what I wanted for him. Like, obviously this meant a lot for him. He had a good time. And yeah, so, I mean, he got to see it all. He got to see decent days, the absolute best days that you possibly could ever have out, backpacking, and then also weather days. And so like he got the full gambit, and he saw sheep. We got close to sheep. We just hung out and had a great time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like you kind of want to have that feeling of keep them wanting more. And I like when my hunts kind of end like that too. So I still definitely have the itch. If you end up like 2 days past what you kind of wanted to be, or what you had the juice or gas or whatever for, and you're just relieved to be home, or if you do get something, you almost can't get home soon enough. You just want to kind of complete the thing. But yeah, it's good to still have that longing to be out there, even after you've had a good time and you get back. It's unlike anything else, man. You can't replicate it.
I think there's only been maybe one time that I've been on a backpacking trip where I was like pretty fed up
Mm.
about being out there and was looking forward to it being over. But every other time it's like I'm tired now, but like I'll go home and I'll sleep in my bed for one night and then I'll wake up and I'll be like, why the fuck am I here? Why, why am I not back out where I need to be?
Yeah. Yeah, when we were waiting for pickup, we couldn't get picked up on Friday. So then, because like your mindset has changed, we didn't have enough hours to be able to shoot a moose and then get it back to camp. So once that finality had been accepted and we were waiting to get picked up, it was like, all right, let's just get picked up. I want to get picked up. And every hour that we were delayed was like, dang it, I want to get picked up, because like the brain has moved on to the next thing, and the next goal is to get out of there. So it's this weird feeling of, I don't really want to leave, but we have to leave. We can't hunt anymore, and now the goal is to get out. So it was a weird transition. And then we ended up not getting flown out Friday at all, so we kind of wasted the day. But obviously, we weren't going to be hunting and say, oh man, we shot a moose, and oh, you're going to be out here in an hour and a half. Well, we still have 5 more hours of processing and packing to do. So can you, come back tomorrow? So yeah, weird feeling with the moose. With the caribou hunt, it was awesome because, we accomplished the goal. We brought the caribou back. We were at the strip. Now let's go get some burgers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like the intensity and veracity at which you attack a hunt changes with the species as well.
Hmm.
Right? Where it's like if you know you're moose hunting and you're like in a drop camp for moose, you're like, all right, well, I got all my stuff here with all our camp and all of our nice stuff. And then we go, I don't know, maybe mile, half mile, whatever it may be, to like a knob to call from every day in the morning and at night and just kind of see what happens. And it's very slow paced versus, like mountainous caribou hunting, in like the central Alaska range, let's say, it's like you're glassing, you're covering ground, you're looking at this, you're always hiking, it's this or that, you're always putting moves on, you see critters, you're always doing everything all the time. And it's kind of the same thing, except not as fanatical when it comes to sheep hunting, in my opinion, or my experience at least, where, I'm not someone who will just, not anymore at least, just put my nose down and just hike for 15 miles in one direction, not stop and glass. It's like, yeah, my mentality with sheep hunting is like, all right, I eventually want to be at this spot. So I got to cover however many miles it is. And so we're just going to kind of cruise, take breaks, get water, whatever, eat, glass around, look at stuff, pull binos out, that kind of crap. And so it seems like at least for me, like my intensity changes with each species. And whenever it's like I don't put a lot of eggs in one basket for any particular hunt, but like my emotions change of like, how bummed am I going to be if I don't shoot something on, a sheep hunt versus a caribou hunt versus a moose hunt, where like for me, in the way that I view moose, a lot of it is like, I don't care about moose particularly. Like I kind of am very opportunistic. I don't set a lot of camps for that. So I don't really, if I go out looking for moose and I don't find one, it's like, oh, okay, well, didn't find one. Move on, whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Darn, this stinks. I wasted I didn't waste, but I spent a whole week's worth of paid time off and hiked my butt off and, slept like a hobo with thousands of dollars of equipment to either not see something or not shoot something.
Yeah. Yeah. Ryan and I talked a couple times about the fact, and this actually started on the caribou hunt on the Hall Road, that people spend thousands of dollars just to do what we're doing, like before we killed anything, just to be up there, just to camp and just to see what we're seeing is worth thousands of dollars to probably millions of people. So there's that perspective to keep too. And then obviously you're there for other reasons, but it's nice to be able to have multiple different things and longer seasons. So if alpine deer doesn't work out, okay, then there's late season alpine, and then there's rut deer, and then you throw in a moose hunt in there too. And in your case, you've got sheep and you've got moose and you've got caribou. So it's nice to have like a 5 month season of different opportunities to get out and chase game and have those different experiences.
Yeah, I always, from the way that you guys down there wax poetically about your deer seasons is that, I remember you put it, I don't remember if you wrote it in an article or if you wrote it in one of your books where you talked about, like, yeah, my success rate is very low, but I'm spending like dozens and dozens and dozens of
Mm,
days in the field. Maybe not full 24-hour days, but it's like I get a morning hunt in or an evening hunt in or both, to varying degrees of intensity. And the reason my success rate is low is because I'm always out there. And so would you rather trade a higher success rate in a shorter amount of time in the field, or would you have more time in the field with a lower success rate?
yeah.
And I would definitely trade more days in the field over everything, no matter what.
Yeah.
Because at this rate, I've been hunting since 2019 for sheep and haven't seen a single one tip over in that whole time. And it's like, I have no, like, I know what I'm doing next August is I'm going sheep hunting again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't, I have better feelings for next year than I did for years in the past of, potential successes. But like out there is like as close to God as that I feel that I can get in some regards, where it's like, it's the absolute most beautiful country. It's the best times, whether I'm spending it with myself, with my friend, or now with my son. So now I know exactly what I'm doing over the 1st of August is that I'm going back out there with my son.
Yeah.
Whether we shoot some or not is almost a non-starter of the argument. It's like we're going out.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing to understand with it too. And when people, you take kids out, you want them to have some level of success. Like when it comes to fishing, because fishing can be pretty boring. And if you don't have success, then, maybe they don't like fishing. But with hunting, there's a likelihood that you won't have success. And so it's not going to be boring in the same way that going to a river and just like casting, and casting maybe can be frustrating, or you get hung up, you get snagged. And so you want people to have a good time, or even if it's not, it doesn't even have to be a kid. It can be, an adult or something like that has never been hunting before. You want them to have fun and be successful, but you have to define that success a little differently than coming home with something, notching a tag, because then you start getting into, well, it was a failed hunt. It wasn't a success. It's like, well, this isn't like moral. If you lose a basketball game and you look for moral victories, well, you still lost. This isn't like that whatsoever. It's a successful experience, and you keep getting after it, and then eventually it's going to pay off in with meat.
Yeah, and like I remember the first couple really big backpacking trips that I took where I was just seeing country like I had never in my life seen before, or where, you if you're driving down like a really scenic highway like the Denali Highway, and you can look on either side of you and or up, down, east, west, whatever, in every direction, it looks awesome, right? But it's just like along the road, it's pretty darn flat for
Yeah.
most of it, right? And then you see the hills that are really beautiful colors and in the far distance. But like with sheep hunting, or I imagine, down in southeast, like alpine hunting for deer, that you're like on these ridges that you get to, side hill over these rolling hills or steep, jagged mountains type of stuff. And you're just able to see these things that it's like, there are very few people who get to do this. And it's like, I feel so lucky and so happy that, that I get to look at this stuff, and then to bring my son in with like a fresh set of eyes and to have him look at stuff for the first time. It's like, this is what it's all about. It's like being out here. I could care less if I shoot something. I could, I would really like for my son to shoot something, but I also am very happy if he doesn't, and almost prefer it if he doesn't, so that when his time comes to shoot a sheep, that he's like, Dad, we did it.
Mm.
Whether it's we went last year or we went for the past 3 years in a row and finally got one, whatever it be, like he'll know that like persistence pays off in this very special animal that, very, very, very few people ever get to shoot in their life.
Yeah. And when I moved to California, I didn't grow up hunting on Prince of Wales Island. We had cross country and it went right into basketball. And so I grew up fishing as much as I could. I had so much fun riding my bike down the river and fish. So when I was in California and I decided to start hunting, it was, I tried to get away from people, but you just couldn't because you hike away from one road and you're getting close to the next road. And there's people everywhere. And there's people whose idea of hunting is just like loud music and drinking. And I was like, this hunting thing is not fun. I don't like it down here. I'd been on a hunt with my high school basketball coach, which kind of like was the impetus to try hunting out. And I was in my early 30s or late 20s or something like that. And so I thought, well, I want the Alaska type hunting. I don't want this other version of hunting because that didn't seem like it was fun at all. And I could definitely have fun and not get something in Alaska versus being out and not getting something in California. In California, it seemed like it was very find a deer and get out of there because it was not all those other things about the experience just were not present.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to people, I feel like you gotta get over it after a certain point of like getting frustrated when you see people.
Yeah. Well, and that was a part of it was the one of the easiest tags to draw in California, and it was a pretty small space with a whole bunch of private land and tens of thousands of tags and a very tiny. So it was one of those areas where just everybody floods to, and if you're lucky, you find like a small buck or something like that. So there's definitely a disproportionate amount of people. It wasn't one of those premium areas in the state where you can have a really good hunting experience and you can maybe get some good deer. Same sort of thing in like Wyoming, where you have preference points and there are some spots that you can draw with few points, but there's going to be a ton of people and you kind of got to get over that. But yeah, it's a mixed bag. I think I've become better at tolerating people and understanding that's part of it. I was really turned off to it in California, but now just, running the program, I think my attitude is much better than it was, but yeah, I was pretty turned off by the California model.
Yeah, there's a difference between also the varying degrees of people that you can run into, right?
Yeah.
You can run into really respectful people that are busting their butts and they just happen to be like within a quarter mile or a mile radius of you, and you're like, oh, well, hey, there's some people, let's go talk to them. It's like, oh, what are you doing? Well, I'm here for doing this. What are you doing? I'm doing the same thing. Okay, well, let's go different directions. All right, cool, man, have a good day,
Yeah.
good luck, stay safe, that kind of thing. And or there's people that are just like tearing up tundra on side by sides and shit to try and beat you or beat someone else, to be like, that's my caribou up there, I'll get off my land, that's it, blah blah. It's
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It's a much different situation.
Yeah.
Like whenever I went on this hunt with my son, excuse me, whenever we were all the way in the back, I glassed back towards where we had come from and I found a tent, and it was just some lady and her dog hiking around to see if she could like do a traverse from one creek to another and then pack raft out back somewhere to wherever she wanted to go. And I was like, today's August 1st. It's the sheep opener. Like, I'm here with my son. Like, please be respectful. And she's like, oh yeah, don't worry. Like, if I see something, I'll turn around. Don't worry. And then whenever we were leaving, we saw like a group of 4 people that were coming in as we were leaving, but they were just like day hikers, and it was 2 old people and their 2 daughters.
Hmm.
And so they were very nice to talk to. And we sat down and like broke bread with them and talked about all kinds of stuff for about an hour. And, my son was sitting there like, Dad, please, can we go? I'm bored type of thing. And then when I went back in there just earlier this month, me and a friend were, all the way in the back, and I was kind of glassing around at the bottoms, and I was like, holy crap, there's people. And we looked at them, and it's like an older couple, not that much older, like maybe 10 years older than me. And they were just day hikers, and they just like went like 700 yards farther than they went, turned around and left.
Hmm.
And I was like, what the heck are they doing? We never even talked to them because we could never find them.
Yeah.
But it was just like, oh, well, there's people that don't have guns. They got bear spray, but like, all right, man, have fun.
Yeah. So what do you got next? We're kind of heading off the cliff into fall, winter.
Yeah. So I just went and saw a few friends who were in town. and they had got back from the same area where I caribou hunted last year. And that's where I met them, was that caribou hunt last year up in the northeastern part of Alaska. And they were up there again, and they shot like 8 caribou or some shit,
Wow.
a moose and a grizzly bear and a wolf. And, they did it, but they have airplanes, more money than God. They're doing it. And so I went there just to go say hi to them and see how it was going. And, they gave me some meat scraps for trapping. And other than that, I have an archery antlerless cow moose tag for the Fairbanks management area that goes from September 1 to the end of November.
Nice.
And so, I got 3 months to find a cow moose somewhere in town to make it tip over with an arrow. Other than that, just kind of, I need to look at my traps, see if I need to do anything to any of them to make them work better than they do, or just kind of clean up around the house, but not much more for outdoor stuff, really.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, you got you'll keep busy up there. I know that for sure. But it seems like every year the summer and early fall season just goes so quick. It's from one trip to another and just flies by.
Yeah, and trying to squeeze in, 3-4 day trips here after doing a big week long hunt and everything. It's taxing on the whole family, and like, burning more time off and trying to figure stuff out, and the logistics of everything just kind of gets amped and amped and amped, and trying to coordinate with other families and stuff for stuff. It becomes a hassle, but it's ultimately always worth it.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. Well, I'm going to head down, and actually, no, it's about time for Haley to go to sleep. So yeah, little daddy duty here.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Thanks, man. Good talking to you.
Always.
All right. See you, man.